Hey guys, hope you're keeping well. Thank you very much for joining in on another live stream. The title of this video is Life as We Know It is Extremely Complex and Intricate. Basically, I want to explore a couple of things that I've been thinking about within regards to reality, with our reality, and how mystical and miraculous it actually is. If you look at life, there's so many different fields of science just to understand all these different aspects of our observable universe, whether it be biology, chemistry, physics, etc. Reality is extremely complex and intricate. Like if you look at DNA, for instance, your DNA is a collection of, we don't really know how long, but maybe billions of years of information, which has been passed on from generation to generation, all the way to creating you from being a single-celled organism that multiplied, cellular multiplication in order to complex and intricate organism that you are, multicellular organism. So we can't even see DNA. You cannot even see DNA with our human eyes, and something so small is proposed to so much information that can actually instruct a human. And not only that, not only is this DNA instructing this single-celled organism how to multiply into a multicellular organism, which is an extremely complex and advanced structure. Your body is unbelievably complex and advanced. It is extremely intricate, from your brain to your nervous system to everything. And so you started off from a single cell. And this single cell inside of it had and was compromised of your mother and your father's DNA, which is holding so much information in something that's so small that we cannot even observe it with the human eye. And the small little thing that's imperceptible by our human vision is holding so much data and information, unbelievable amounts of data and information that is instructing your body on how to develop and grow. So every single plant species, every single animal species has their own unique subset of DNA, which is not only instructing the single-celled organism to basically evolve into a multicellular organism in an egg or in the womb of a mother or an animal, but after this human or animal is born, this tiny DNA that's do and how to process chemicals, nutrients. Hey, Secretary, great to see you. Hope you're keeping well, brother. Good to see you again. So it's unbelievable to imagine that a tiny little piece of DNA can basically hold so much information. By the way, Secretary, anytime you want to join, you're more than welcome to. We can chat about this. So it's unbelievable. Something that's, microscopic, not even conventional microscopes can observe DNA, because it's so small, yet it holds so much information. And as you start off in the womb as a single-celled organism and this DNA starts to instruct your evolution from a zygote to a human being, a human baby. It's creating a brain, it's creating billions of neurons, it's creating your nervous system, everything, a perfect level of homeostasis within this newly developed body. And from this, in the womb, this miraculous, magical experience of information that may be ancient information passed on from generation to generation to generation, somehow lands up in you. And it's perplexing to think about just that alone, how unbelievably intricate and complicated our birth is, us developing in the womb of our mothers, and how this tiny little piece of DNA can hold all that information of how this newborn baby must basically evolve. because as we grow through life, we evolve. We evolve from a zygote, single-celled organism, into a multicellular organism. And so we're constantly evolving. And in this womb, consciousness is created, not only in humans, but in animals as well, through this unbelievably complicated experience. Something even more complicated is emerging out of it, which is consciousness. And so us as human beings, or beings, animal beings, are developing consciousness for the first time. Only be limited towards the brain. But as I've been researching things like near-death experiences and certain experiences that are unexplainable based on our current understanding of consciousness and the brain. For instance, there was a story of this lady who had passed away in a hospital bed, and she basically levitated above her body, and she levitated above a ceiling fan, and she was able to see on the top surface of the ceiling fan, it had a red sticker. So this lady just passed, she just left her body, she levitated above her body in the operating room, and she levitated above the ceiling fan and saw a red sticker. And that wasn't the only thing she noticed. She noticed a whole bunch of other things of who was in the room, what they were doing to her, etc. And eventually she had this whole other crazy experience, not only her consciousness leaving her body in the room and seeing the sticker, but eventually when she was resuscitated, she told one of the nurses that she saw a red sticker on top of the ceiling fan. So the nurse actually went ahead and got a ladder and looked above the ceiling fan, and lo and behold, there was a red sticker, just as this lady had described. After having been declared clinically dead, she had levitated above and actually seen something that was in the room that was later verified by other people and herself when she was resuscitated and her consciousness had eventually come back into her body. So you got to ask yourself, that's just one story. Another story is people who are blind and have near-death experiences, and for the first time ever, they're able to see. They're able to see for the first time, leaving their body. Same sort of experience that's reported amongst thousands of people. And for the first time, being able to see. Hey, Stacey, hope you're keeping well. Good to see you. Hope you're keeping well. So, blind people, and this is not just one blind person, this is a couple of blind people who are reported dying, clinically dying, leaving their body, and for the first time being able to actually see. So they are leaving their body in the hospital or wherever, and they're reporting seeing for the first time ever. I don't know how this cat just got in here. You let this cat out. But they're reporting being able to see. So you got to ask yourself the question, okay? How are people, when they're dying and when they're recording zero brain activity, how are they having consciousness experiences that exist outside of the 5 senses of their physical body? Well, the only way to explain that is we don't completely understand. Sorry, give me a second. We don't completely understand the brain. We don't completely understand consciousness clearly, because mainstream science will tell you that, a human should not be able to experience any sense of consciousness when there's zero brain activity. Yet when these people are dying and their brains are reporting zero brain activity, they're still reporting having these conscious experiences. Some of it sounds hallucinogenic, I'll admit, but the other end of it is these people actually having out-of-body experiences where they are leaving their body, and the things that they're seeing of this physical world in another realm or dimension of consciousness clearly is being validated when they're coming back into the body. So you got to ask yourself the question. We clearly do not understand the brain if things that we do not believe are possible are happening. For instance, nobody would believe a blind person would be able to see, especially not in a near-death experience. That's a beautiful example in life that shows you when something happens that we didn't believe could happen. So that shows me that we're extremely complex and intricate organisms on a biological and cellular level. And the fact that that biological composition creates an emergence of consciousness in each being, and the fact that that consciousness is prolonged and continued, reportedly, even when people are clinically dead, when they're reporting zero brain activity, is showing you on a fundamental level how unbelievably complex and intricate reality is. And we, as a human species, have to go ahead and admit that we do not understand reality. Because if we stop at our current understanding, we're going to develop a very materialistic and deterministic perspective of reality. You know, oh, we're this human biological organism that works like some sort of to exist. You know, that's a very horrible perspective, because I believe it's so to experience consciousness and then to cease to exist. It just sounds like an unintelligent composition and structure of biological beings in reality, and conscious beings in reality. But what we're finding out year after year, you know, we're only a 6,000-year-old civilization. What we continue to find out is that our consciousness, we know nothing. Scientists do not know where consciousness originates from. And when we look at these near-death experiences, what we start to see is that we don't know what consciousness is dependent upon in order to continue to keep existing. Because if someone is reporting being conscious after reporting zero brain activity, it's quite clear that our consciousness does not depend on our physiological body, this mechanism, this third-dimensional mechanism we have to experience third-dimensional reality. And so we may be, based on that, dimensional beings in terms of consciousness. Because if somebody can leave their body when they're dead and see everything around them as it is and report back what medicine is used, what certain doctors had looked like, even blood on their shirts, what certain conversations people were having outside of the five senses that exist outside of the body. Well, it shows us that our consciousness is extremely complex beyond our current level of understanding. It's extremely complex. And why shouldn't it be? Because when we look at reality, when we look at quantum physics, when we look at physics, when we look at neurology, biology, this universe, etc., so forth and so on, it's so unbelievably intricate. When we start zooming in on a quantum level and observing protons and electrons and photons and the weird states of superposition and quantum entanglement that exist, our science is continuing to show us that the fundamental nature and building blocks of reality is unbelievably complex and intricate, beyond our understanding of physicality, beyond this physical, deterministic, reductionist perspective of reality. That is quite depressing, actually, which a lot of people in our society and civilization have. They have this perspective that you live, you die, and that's it. And that's all there is to reality. But what we're finding out is that that's not exactly true, because many people, there's scientific institutes on my Patreon, which I've been sharing videos of, who have actually been funded to actually research these phenomenons. So certain scientists have been researching near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, and even psychic activity and phenomenon. My main interest and focus has been on the near-death experiences and the reports of them, because the information that we're getting from this is quite astounding, and it's showing and it's proving that people can experience consciousness even when zero brain activity is recorded or measured, showing us that. And also, not only that, they're having these out-of-body experiences where they're experiencing reality beyond their body, beyond the limitation of the five senses of their body. So you have to think about how crazy that is. People are dying, they're leaving their body that people believe we need in order to have consciousness, and they're actually continuing to be conscious and not only continuing to be conscious, but observing their environment as it is, if they would still be alive in their body. So you got to ask yourself the question, if that is true, which it is true because so many thousands of people have been reporting this and so many cases have been validated and confirmed of their experience of leaving their body and seeing things that they wouldn't have been able to see beyond their five senses. Well, it's clearly showing us that we have senses beyond our five senses. It's showing us that our consciousness is not dependent on our body and it's not dependent on the limitations of our five senses. So whatever that is, our soul, our spirit, our consciousness, which is continuing to exist, is proving to be even more complex in understanding than our physical body alone. Because it must be existing on some sort of interdimensional, multidimensional level that is still allowing it to perceive this physical world and universe. So, I mean, it's mind-blowing when you start looking into all these scientific fields, when you start looking into physics, when you look into all these things, and when you start seeing how unbelievably complex reality is. And it continues to become even more complex because as our science develops and evolves over time, we find out more information about the fundamental building blocks and nature of reality. So we are in our infancy within regards to actually studying this consciousness phenomenon that occurs when a baby is born and develops in the womb, which is unbelievable in itself, to think that we as beings which inhabit these physical biological bodies have self-awareness and consciousness. And the way that consciousness works with the mechanical processings of our brain and our body is unbelievably miraculous and complicating. But it becomes even more miraculous and complicating when you begin to understand that the consciousness itself has its own sensory perception outside of our body, outside of the five senses. So what I'm basically essentially trying to say, and the point I'm trying to make, is that when you look at reality, it just continues to blow your mind. It just keeps blowing my mind. And when you look at certain phenomena, it blows my mind even further. It's miraculous. I mean, the fact that existence had emerged from out of nowhere, from nothing. And this existence, this infinite void of reality, which is perplexing in itself, if you believe in that. Some people don't believe in that, and I understand. Even some scientists don't believe in there being an infinite universe, funnily enough. They think there has to be certain limitations. And obviously flat earthers wouldn't agree. But from my perspective and understanding, I would say that we live in an infinite void of space and time. And to think that this domain, this space and environment of reality, which would even allow space and time to exist in the first place, has emerged out of nothing, is mind-blowing. Is completely, totally, utterly mind-blowing. And then there's no other way for me to explain it other than it being extremely miraculous and somewhat divine in its nature, especially when we begin to see the interconnected nature of reality, the interconnected nature of consciousness and certain consciousness phenomena that people have been reporting, certain psychic phenomena and activities that people have reported. And there's many stories, and I've been looking at a lot of these stories. And so, you know, and then you look at quantum physics, you look at superposition and quantum entanglement, and I think what science is leading towards understanding is that there is a unified field of reality, and somehow this unified field of reality is quantumly entangled. And why wouldn't it be a unified field of reality? Because we're existing in one domain and space of reality. So by that fact alone, every single variable within this physical universe is interconnected. Now, some people are going on about simulation theory, this position that there's a potentiality that we're in a computer program, which I believe is completely and totally preposterous and extremely dangerous to believe, and it requires faith to believe in, because you're dehumanizing people. You are taking away dignity from all life and animals, and somehow saying that we are just a simulation, you know? And the reason they're getting towards this position of saying, oh, well, we must live in a simulation is because the more and more science we look into and the more and more scientific research and understandings and progress we make, we're beginning to see the information-based nature of reality in how everything is encoded. As I said, our DNA is encoded. Our world has certain laws of physics and reality and can be reduced to certain mathematical interpretations and understandings. And so naturally, in any universe to exist, there would be a level of capability to research the nature of that existence. And naturally, what you would begin to see are patterns and algorithms within reality and creation, which begin to show us the intelligent and organized nature of this physical reality. So I think it's a huge stretch to see that and jump from it and say, oh, because of that, and because there's all this information and encoding within all reality, we must be in a computer program, because now in our current level of civilization and evolution of this technological evolution of civilization, in creating computers and using computers as a reference point to see that, oh, we're creating video games, we're creating this, we're creating that, and we're able to simulate these environments. But, and so to go ahead and say that this extremely, unbelievably complex reality is nothing but a byproduct of a computer simulation, I think it's in many ways impossible, because our level of understanding of reality and intelligence would have to be so unbelievably complex in understanding. We would have to be so intelligent, unbelievably intelligent to create a universe that has its own laws, an infinite universe that has infinite variables and has laws within it. Like our DNA, like biology, like the atmospheric conditions, the fact that we need oxygen, the fact that trees produce oxygen, the ecosystems, the complicated and complex interdependent ecosystems that this world may have. It's so unbelievably complex. There's so much data and information in reality that can be extrapolated from our reality. It's almost infinite. It is infinite. It's infinite. So these scientists are saying that somehow some being has that level of intelligence, and to create a computer to process and simulate an infinite universe would require you to have unlimited processing power and unlimited energy to sustain that computer. Because you have to think, and what I'm basically saying is I don't agree with it. I don't agree with the simulation theory at all. I think it's fantasy in many ways. I think that, and the reason why it's fantasy is because what you're basically saying is that somebody has been so intelligent to take infinite variables that work in an extremely complex system of information and data and biology and physicality, and not only in a third dimensional realm, but in multiple dimensions. Okay, so if we look at reality, we'll see that we live in what I like to call a variable matrix. Every single point of information is a variable. So our DNA, how our DNA basically communicates to cells to basically create extremely complex multicellular organisms. It's an unbelievable information that exists on almost quantum levels and interact with quantum realities, subatomic energies. So every level of reality is in a state of synergy with every dimension. So this third dimension is interacting with whatever dimensions may exist after this. Our physical dimension of physiology exists simultaneously on subatomic and quantum dimensions of scale. And you're talking about infinite scale multiplied or divided. And this realm of reality that's infinite in every way, whether you're dividing the space of reality or multiplying the space of reality, whether it's looking at just the third dimension or it's looking at possible dimensions that exist beyond this dimension. What that would have to mean is that every single dimension and every single aspect of reality is existing in a somewhat of a perfect state of homeostasis, where everything is working in perfect synergy. in this ecosystem of reality in which it is that we happen to exist in. So you're not only finding variables on this dimension, but you'll find variables on that dimension and that dimension. And all these variables and points of information have to be interacting with one another to create this unified experience of reality within a unified field of reality. So you have to think about how unbelievably complicated that is. Reality is unbelievably complicated. It is extremely complex, and it's even more complex beyond our current understanding, because we don't understand the potential multidimensional nature of our reality. So to go ahead and say that somebody was intelligent enough in order to create a computer that could simulate a multidimensional reality and experience in an infinite void of space and time, as well as having the capability of creating consciousness and holding all these variables of thoughts, of ideologies, of perspectives, of environmental conditions, physiological, biological conditions, neurological conditions, how all of these things work in tandem and in the same context of each other. It's just unbelievable amounts of data and information that can be extrapolated from understanding our reality, which is infinite. So to say that somehow to reduce this to a computer program takes away from how complicated our reality is beyond what it is we know. Because we don't know everything about reality. We're finding more and more things out about reality. Near-death experiences has only become a recent scientific field of study. Certain fields of consciousness exploration and study are quite recent in their development within regards to our civilization's history, development, and evolution. So we're extremely complicated. What you're trying to basically say, what the scientists are trying to say, which I don't agree with, I think it's horrible. I think it's a real nightmare theory. And that's what it is. It's a theory that requires a lot of faith. To say that somehow that this universe is not miraculously, magically, divinely orchestrated, now you're taking away from that. And it's funny because they're quick to not believe in God, a creator of this universe, but then to go ahead and believe in a programmer and a creator of a simulated universe without zero evidence or proof to basically suggest or prove that actually is the case. Takes away from the fact that this is a naturally emergent universe that has natural dimensions to it and has natural consciousness. We're reducing consciousness to computer program, which is, I think, extremely dangerous. And it's extremely depressing because it takes away from the beautiful nature of reality. It takes away from the beautiful nature of somehow the miracle of reality existing in the first place. Now you want to overlook that and you want to go ahead and say there's no miracle of a natural emergent universe, but instead it's a simulated synthetic universe. You're dehumanizing people. You're basically saying that you're synthetic programs. Yes, we have DNA. Yes, our DNA is programmed and programs us to behave in certain ways. And it is quite perplexing to imagine that, many things in our life are byproducts of our DNA, our consciousness, our brain. I mean, to think that the instructions of how to develop a single cell zygote into a multicellular organism that has a brain that is so unbelievably complex and complicated, to think that one little piece of DNA has all that information to instruct every single organ of how to develop and how to function throughout your life cycle here on Earth as you're still alive. Naturally, we have these bodies. The fact that we have bodies is miraculous. It's when you look at how complicated our bodies are, how complicated the environments that our bodies exist in, and how we rely on our environment in order to be able to exist within this body. For example, we rely on oxygen. We need to breathe oxygen. If you don't breathe oxygen within this environment, you will die. And Stacey's saying, give birth, that child is not a simulation. Exactly. So who created the simulation? The chicken and the egg. I love that. We have a divine creator. This topic is fascinating. Maybe some of that knowledge is held in our so-called junk DNA. It's funny that you mentioned junk DNA because this Junk DNA is being found by science to not be junk anymore, because if we're finding out that it actually supports our DNA in many ways that we are unaware of. So it's not actually junk. We just don't understand how it works. So that's a really good point, because we only understand so much about DNA. There's so much we don't understand about DNA clearly, and this is being proven by science, biomedical science, and I suppose chemistry over and over again, that this DNA that we called junk and thought was junk is actually not junk. It actually has a purpose and function. But the full purpose and function of this, like 80% of DNA that we have not decoded yet, we don't understand how it works. We don't understand what it does. So our understanding of biology and the world, as advanced as it is extremely limited, unbelievably limited. And there's so much more information that is unknown to us, right? So the fact that we have a body, the fact that we have consciousness that is emerged as a byproduct of this body, the fact that we have reports of people experiencing consciousness after the so-called death of this body, is unbelievably miraculous and complicated and complex and unbelievably intricate beyond our current level of understanding. So, science is good in many ways, but science in itself becomes a religion when people believe that they've learned everything there is to learn, because clearly we haven't. There's so much evidence to show that we simply have not, whether it's junk DNA, whether it is out-of-body experiences, whether it is near-death experiences and the survival of consciousness beyond the physical death of a body. Where the reality is unbelievably mysterious, and I believe a lot of people who have the scientific perspective develop a very arrogant perspective of their understanding of reality, assuming that they have enough information to know how it works, how it came about, and things like life after death. So, but science is also extremely useful and was inevitable, because us as humans, we of course had to start to research and understand who we are, what we are, our physiology, our environment, the nature of this environment, the fundamental building blocks of it, and how it works. Naturally, our human curiosity, naturally, the mysterious nature of life. Life is very mysterious. How can it not be? You're born and then you die, and you have all this DNA that's creating an extremely complex and complicated multicellular organisms, which consciousness becomes a byproduct of. The reality is so mysterious because there's so many things we don't know, and there's so many things we don't understand. The mysteries of the universe, the mysteries of reality are seemingly never-ending and unlimitedly perplexing. So I think speaking about this, you should feel very grateful if you have a perfect functioning body, if you have no physical ailments or disease or disabilities, if you have money, if you have food, if you have sustenance. Because when we look at the variables in reality, and we look at life here on Earth, for example, we see poverty, we see disease, we see disability, we see blindness, we see paralysis, we see all sorts of physical ailments and issues. And some people are really suffering here on Earth. And I know a lot of people may not want to look at this, but you have to look at it in order to be able to develop an honest sense of empathy towards your fellow man and woman. We need to, as a human species, be able to develop empathy. And this is one of the things I'm going to go into within this conversation. Not only is reality complex, but we have an extremely complex society and civilization. And we have extremely complex problems that some people face within this civilization, society, as life here on Earth. As I've explained to you, some people cannot see. Some people cannot hear. Some people are incredibly unfortunate. So I think that, before I continue this conversation, one of the things I've been realizing over and over again is I'm extremely blessed and lucky just to be alive. I know it's extremely scary world to be in, an extremely scary universe, and sometimes with so many people, you can feel so alone. And I can only imagine how alone some people feel, especially some of these people that have certain disabilities and ailments or disadvantages in life, whether it be poverty or whatever the case may be. So I just to have a perfect functioning body, perfect functioning brain, a normal functioning body, a normal functioning brain, I'm extremely fortunate and extremely blessed and extremely lucky. And it's a very great thing to keep in mind because sometimes we can and may get depressed, but some people may have it so much more harder than we do. And if you think about all the variables that go into making a newborn baby, genetics, etc., and so forth and so on, all the variables of which family you could be born into, all the variables of what progresses and happens to you throughout your life, with all the risks and dangers that life may present. Because life is extremely scary in that way. It seemingly presents a lot of risks and dangers with just living a human life and hoping that you have an uninterrupted and successful experience of living as a human being here on earth while you're still alive. So, all these variables that go into producing a happy, healthy human in a happy, healthy family with a happy, healthy body, there's a lot of variables that go into that. It's almost perplexing, and it's extremely miraculous to think that you are a genetic product of generations of humans on this earth. And all of us, we don't really understand. We theoretically have an idea of how old the earth is. And according to that scientific perspective, it's billions of years old. And if that is the case, and if that is true, it can be confirmed later with more empirical evidence and information, then you are a byproduct of ancient beings, of ancient living cellular organisms. And if you think about all those, this is the other thing about a quantum computer simulating a reality would have to do. It would have to simulate the past, present, and future simultaneously and actually be able to create physics and time. So if you think about how advanced the computer would have to be in order to be able to accomplish processing and simulating that, it would have to be unbelievably extremely advanced in its processing capability. It would have to have infinite processing capability, and it would have to have an infinite energy source in order to sustain that infinite processing capability. And would it need to be able to process an infinite space, infinite void of reality, and process the past, future, and present simultaneously. So when you add all these dimensions of time and dimensions of reality, you're talking about infinite variables. How long would it take humans to be able to develop a computer to be able to do that? I would hope and say it's impossible because of how complex reality is, how complex your understanding of reality would have to be. And also the civilization would have to be able to evolve and progress long enough without destroying itself to be able to continue to further itself in developing such sophisticated technology that would be able to go ahead and simulate something like a universe, which is extremely unbelievably complex and intricate to do. And not only that, but be able to create consciousness. So this is why I don't believe that theory. I believe it's an unfortunate state of reality in Earth's civilization that we're in to go ahead and reduce this beautiful yet scary and sometimes horrible reality, I'm going to be very honest with you, to a computer simulation. I don't want to take out the beauty of life and people's ability to see the beauty, but if we're honest with ourselves, nature and reality is kind of scary, actually. We got beings eating other beings in order to survive and stay alive. We've got the human condition, which throughout our history of civilization has resulted in wars, has resulted in current modern poverties and developments of diseases here on this earth. Us as humans, I would say that we are in our infancy within our evolution as a civilization and people, because humans are still violent. Humans can be very violent, they can be very narcissistic, and they can be very ugly. And the current reality in which it is that we exist in, this capitalistic survivalist reality that we happen to live in, seems to breed that sort of consciousness, seems to breed those sort of people who develop this very dead, materialistic, and deterministic perspective of reality, which leads them to believing in crazy things like we're living in a computer simulation, just further taking away the beauty of our existence away from us. And but we are very underdeveloped as a people who have learned how to peacefully coexist with each other, how to develop levels of empathy, and how to concentrate that empathy towards improving the lives of other people here on earth in this generation that you may happen to be in, and for many generations to come. But in order for people to actually care, they need to not believe that we're in a simulation, first of all. Okay, they need to not believe that in this extremely limiting, horrible, materialistic perspective of reality, like you live and you die and that's it, and you stop existing, and overlooking things like love, things like empathy, things like connection, which us as a civilization and people happen to do all the time. And it kind of scares me and makes me worried about that, because, in developing an increased sense of sensitivity and empathy towards other humans on this earth, some people are suffering, some people are in poor and terrible conditions. And us, as I'm generalizing here, but us as a civilization are not prioritizing looking after one another, looking after our environment, looking after our animals, looking after our people. And instead, we have a horrible reflection of this, where we live in it can be and can seem to be a very selfish civilization with selfish people who don't care about each other, who don't value love, who don't value things like the teachings of Jesus, forgiveness, love, charity. Everything that I'm basically discussing, Jesus had spoken about and emphasized the importance of. Which is why I'm very grateful for Jesus and his teachings, because it's one of the few places where you find someone explaining to you the importance of love, the existence of life after death, the meaning and value of life, the importance of looking after one another, the importance of evolving to the point where you can forgive your enemies and bless your enemies if you have anything at all. So, I'm very grateful that those teachings even to exist to begin with, because there's very few places where you'll find people emphasizing the importance of those extremely valued aspects of the human condition. Love. Us as a society, look at depression, look at how much depression has increased. Depression is at an all-time high, according to scientific surveys and research. And it's because the world we live in, us as humans, in a self-centered, materialistic, capitalistic world, it breeds selfishness, and it breeds this need for survival within a materialistic world. And that survival prevents that requirement of survival prevents people from practicing and developing empathy and unconditional love towards one another. This materialistic world where we place more value on material items as opposed to the lives of other people breeds and creates a world that produces a depressing environment, depressed people. And the world government's job should be to make sure that we live in a happy world, that the index of happiness within humans is healthy and good. But we're doing the opposite. We're creating a world that is very depressing for a lot of people, that doesn't have good leadership, that doesn't place huge emphasis and prioritize, let's say, like the teachings of Jesus, for us to love one another, to work with one another, and to see beyond the boundaries that exist beyond our uniqueness. unique races, unique cultural backgrounds, etc. So, I worry about future generations because we need strong leadership as people to inspire humanity to prioritize the practice of empathy towards their fellow man, towards the fellow beings that they coexist with. And if we don't do that, then it's just going to be quite disappointing life here on Earth, because a lot of the problems we face will not be solved or will become incredibly harder in order to solve, like poverty, like sickness, illness, and disease, like bullying, like narcissism, all these things that this environment breeds. I mean, suicide. Nobody should ever be in the position to unalive themselves. But that's the world we happen to live in. We live in a world which for some people is very dark and depressing. Not for some people, for a lot of people. And it can be, especially if you develop this meaningless, materialistic perspective of reality, which is quite nihilist in nature. The scientific perspective it breeds nihilism. It breeds a lack of people being able to see the importance and meaning of things like love, like connection, and all these deep intrinsic values that us as humans have within the developments of our stories, within the developments of our lives. So, we live in a world where there's so many people, there's so much technology connecting these people, but people have to work, people have to survive. And because of that, and we're very social beings, yet we're unable to socialize with people because people are so caught and trapped within their indifference and their problems and their need for survival, that we live in a world with so many people, yet there's so little good, wholesome socialization. And we live in a world where there's so many people, so much interconnectivity, but so much loneliness. And if those aren't big enough problems alone, people need money, they need to survive, they need to earn, they need to live. And then they need to live in the context of a society, a context of a government and countries and wars and so forth and so on. So you look at all these variables and it can be quite overwhelming if you think about it too much. But that makes our world quite a hard and scary world to actually be in and to actually live in. And because of that, many people face many problems. So the reason I'm speaking about this is because I would like to see the evolution of civilization, not only from a technological forefront. The technology is useless if humans just become more cold and disconnected. And if we live in a colder, more disconnected world, we live in a world that cares less for their fellow man, for their fellow people. So I would like to see great leadership take place, which would lead people in the direction of prioritizing and teaching the importance that we all coexist together, we all live together. So we need to accept one another. We need to not only accept ourselves and our own indifference, but we need to accept other people's uniquenesses and their own level of indifference as a species of humans here. And that has to be heavily prioritized within the leadership of Earth to teach it. It's crazy to think that it has to be taught, but it does have to be taught. Because if you don't teach children this, if you don't teach people this, you don't teach them the importance and meaning and value of life and the importance and meaning of value of the lives of everyone else around you. People grow up developing very little empathy towards the situations and conditions of others. And as long as that disconnection towards each other continues to take place, our progress and evolution towards solving each other's problems and issues will be limited. We will breed more people that are narcissistic, that are liars, that are unable to forgive, unable to love, unable to exhibit empathy. And that's what the society breeds and produces. And, it's a world where people respect you for money. They respect you for status, as opposed to just respecting you for being a fellow brother or sister. or human being. And because of that, you know, and if you think about where our civilization has come from over the past 6,000 years of these continual wars, territorial expansions, the creation of social contracts within governments that has led us towards this point, we've come from quite a dark history, from oppression, from slavery, from exploitation of our environment, exploitation of animals, exploitation of each other. We've come from a very dark history, and maybe we're only at the certain point within our evolution where humans have only started to begin to prioritize what it is that I'm telling you that humans should prioritize, which is teaching human beings how to care more, as opposed to not care. You know, people need to care more. They need to be taught how to care, which is crazy to think that that actually has to be done. So, you know, I'm one person working towards doing this and changing the world through creating technology and so forth and so on to teach and encourage this level of mentality, this ideological composition in prioritizing love. You know, basically, trying to become Christ-like in the sense that Jesus cared for his fellow man to the point that he came to save us and he came to alleviate our worry about death. He was one of the few people in history that spoke so much about life after death, about the meaning and value of love, so forth and so on, as I've just mentioned before. So, you know, those are great teachings. Love one another, love thy neighbor. You know, those are unbelievable teachings that have been passed down to us. If we didn't have Jesus, we wouldn't have had such an incredible story that really emphasized and prioritized those things. You know, love one another as I love you, in the way in which it has been done. So I'm grateful for that, because just like all information we have today, it's been passed on from those before us, whether it's scientific information, historical information, or religious information. It's been passed down from century to century, from generation to generation. And in this modern context, we have those available resources, which can remind us and teach us the importance of love, the importance of forgiveness, and the wondrous, miraculous nature of life and potentiality, which I'm starting to believe in more and more every day, of life after death. Which, you know, if we continue to exist after we die, it continues to create so much more meaning within our existence, within our lives here on earth. You know, that meaning seems to diminish and die and fizzle away if you believe that your existence will just one day magically cease to exist. So these things in our cultural, ideological framework breed faith and hope and meaning. And we need faith and hope, because if you have no faith and hope, you are a lost cause. You will become depressed, and you can get wrapped in a very materialistic, deductive perspective of reality. And that can be very depressing and meaningless and nihilistic. And sometimes life can seem completely, totally bland and mundane and meaningless. But if our souls are infinite and we continue to exist, which I believe we do, then it implies that our lives have so much more meaning than we may have originally thought, if you had believed that your existence will just cease to exist one day. So meaning, value, purpose, they breed hope, they breed inspiration, and they breed meaning. And the more meaning we have, there's a meaning behind why it is we should love one another. There's meaning in that. There's meaning in why we should learn to become more empathetic towards others. There's great meaning and value that is derived out of that meaning. But when we as a society and a civilization overlook that meaning and the value of it, then humans just become more cold. They become more arrogant. They become more manipulative. and they become more uncaring. And so I hope in the future there are people and leaders and, whoever they may be, that can steer civilization in that direction. Because technological evolution is going to happen no matter what. Resource dependency, and our environment, we are going to have to learn as a species how to peacefully coexist with every element of this reality, of our reality. And as technology evolves and develops, and they eventually create things like general intelligence, which I think is very dangerous. Creating a sentient life form in the form of AI has huge ethical concerns and implications. Like, it's extremely inconsiderate to create a being that can be conscious of its own existence. So, to go back to what Robin Campbell is saying here, you cannot teach the gifts of the Spirit like to an NPC, not possible. I agree. Love covers a multitude of sins. Amen. So beautiful, Jesse. All of our experiences are used for good of those who love God. Amen. Absolutely. Totally agree with that. Human touch and connection is essential for life. Loneliness right now is exponential. So sad. Completely, totally. Us as 3D humans create computer simulations. We are temporarily experiencing this life within a symbiotic, reciprocal simulation. We're co-creating our own reality tunnels. And we need each other. Failure to thrive is very real. And love and empathy is essential. In Sacred Terra, the final experiment takes place in 2 days. They're already on their way down to the 80th parallel. They'll be live streaming. Awesome. And I'm grateful every day to be the nurse and not the patient. So I go above and beyond for my patients. It's great to hear. So, we're developing quantum computers now, which are developing exponential processing capability compared to CPU and GPU processing capability, normal traditional computers. So computers are evolving and progressing. But even if you could create a simulated universe, doesn't mean you should. Even if you can create consciousness, does not mean you should. Because, for me, the idea of a simulated reality, is a horror story. Because if someone can simulate your reality, they can simulate your death and simulate potentially what happens after your death. They can simulate hell. So, the last thing I want to believe is that I'm stuck in some nerdy scientific computer programs, computer simulation, because it's an extremely horrifying thought, unbelievably horrifying. And I don't believe that, but I do think it's dangerous that they're teaching that, and they're prepared to believe in a programmer having programmed our existence than believing in God or a naturally emergent universe. So these are some of the things that are being introduced into the human psyche, these new theoretical constructs. And some of them are quite dangerous. I don't want to speak too much about it because it can get a little boring. And I don't want to hop on to this horror story, this imaginative horror story that people have created, this idea that we're reduced to being ones and zeros in a computer simulation. I don't believe that. I believe we're in a beautiful, divine, and naturally emergent, whether through God or naturally emerging universe. And I believe it is multidimensional. I believe that life, life continues to produce. Life just continues to thrive in many ways, which is why we should prioritize preserving that life and not destroying it. But basically what I'm trying to say is that life created life. God created life. And we have life. And I believe our life is infinite and exponential beyond our current level of understanding and beyond our physical bodies, beyond physicality. For us to believe that life only can exist within a physical universe is an extremely limiting viewpoint. Why believe that? Why believe that the nature of reality can produce life beyond this dimension, beyond these dimensions, and produce consciousness? So I've been struggling with this because it's been worrying me. I mean, to think that you get born into a family with a mother and a father, a family that you grow to love and learn to love, and to think that one day you won't be with them and potentially never see them again is an extremely saddening thought that I don't believe and that I wouldn't like to believe, because I would like to believe that life, love, God, however you'd like to view it, is a lot more beautiful than we're able to see right now. I believe that there's a lot of goodness in life, and I believe a lot of that goodness can perpetuate into eternity, perpetuate into infinity. And so, you can develop a very pessimistic, nihilistic perspective of reality dependent upon what it is you believe. Believing that life is so short and temporary, believing that our relationships here on earth are temporary. I believe that we are eternal beings and that we will continue to be surprised once we die. Imagine that wonderful relief and surprise, like many of these people who have near-death experiences, who are actually hovering above their body and seeing their dead body, how surprised they may have been in order to see that their consciousness is still existing. Wow, my body's down there, but I'm up here and I'm still alive. Imagine the experience of that, of one day passing on, and once you leave your body, you're like, wow, I'm still alive. And what will happen after that? What could happen? Because you must be in another dimension of reality. As I said, I believe our consciousness is multidimensional. I believe there's a lot of evidence and proof that suggests that and shows that, especially research into near-death and out-of-body experiences. I believe what we're being shown in this early infancy of this research into these certain fields and trajectories is that our consciousness may be far more advanced than we are aware, to the point that it can perceive reality and exist within reality outside of a physical body. I think that is true. I believe that. I based on what I've learned, I know that's true. And so I think in the truth of that, it just adds so much more mystery and so much more miraculous elements towards our reality. I mean, to think that, first of all, this physical universe can emerge and we can exist in this extremely complicated system of reality. And then to think that our consciousness can perceive outside of the limitations of our physical body and that can survive death. I think that is, it's hard to wrap your head around, actually. I believe we have souls because of that. And I believe that the reality of us having souls shows that we are even more sophisticated and complicated and miraculous than we may know. And with the prospect of consciousness being able to exist outside of a body and perceive outside of a body, which has been proven and shown time and time again, depending on where you're looking, just provides further evidence that we are extremely intricate, miraculous, complicated beings in our multidimensional conscious nature, within regards to the nature of our consciousness pertaining to our ability to perceive our own existence. So I don't really know the implications of us being able to further prove that and people being able to accept that. I think it would probably reduce a lot of the depression here in this world. I think it would probably connect us closer to one another, maybe. And I think that may actually be where our society here on Earth is leading towards. One of the things I predicted after 2020 was people would develop far more of a keen interest within religion, within God, within reality, within the nature of existence, and maybe more curious about life after death and more curious about death. But many people avoid the topic of death because it seems to scare a lot of people and deters them away from thinking in that direction. And so a lot of people are, as our society is evolving, what I can see happening is that we will prioritize understanding this more as people. Humans will become more fascinated with things like near-death experiences and the reality of life after death. We may even evolve our scientific understanding further to provide more proof and evidence of this reality. So I think that if humans knew that their life would continue after this life, it would dramatically change the way people behave. It would dramatically change the way people feel about themselves, feel about each other, and feel about their life. It may dramatically change the amount of meaning and value and purpose they're able to find within their own lives. But as I said, we have a lot of people that don't believe and avoid this. And I believe humans will become more and more curious about this. And our curiosity will lead us to more discoveries within regards to this, which is what we're already seeing taking place with the emergence of certain scientific institutes and fields that research psychic phenomenon and near-death experiences / phenomenon. So we're already seeing this pattern take place within the evolution of our conscious focus of reality here on Earth. And I believe humans are going to become a lot more curious about what happens after they die, where it is we come from, how all of this emerged. Because I believe the more intelligent the species becomes, the more self-aware and self-conscious they can become. I believe that we live in a reality that is more self-conscious than it's ever been, thanks to social media, thanks to mainstream media, thanks to Hollywood, thanks to movies that is portraying a certain worldview of life and shaping and programming the minds of human beings here on this earth. The art and literature and music and the cultural context which we live in inspires and shapes the way humans think, change, evolve, and develop, and it inspires and shapes what it is we focus on. So I believe with the emergence of things like TV, with the emergence of things like news and media and interconnectivity and social media, and the fact that we have more information available at our fingertips than we've ever had before is showing that humans are becoming smarter. Humans are obviously becoming smarter because they have more access to information. And so as our human intelligence increases, so will the level of our introspection and self-awareness. I believe the more intelligent humans become, the more self-aware they can become. Actually, sometimes there's the opposite effect. People develop more intelligence and become less self-aware. But either way, the fact that we have so much information at our fingertips, the fact that human species are becoming more intelligent than ever because of that, and therefore they're becoming more self-aware and more conscious, I suppose, of themselves, of their reality, of the nature of their reality, of their own psychology. Like, for instance, you couldn't just randomly search up psychology. You couldn't randomly search physics and science. You couldn't randomly search the Bible and religions and people's interpretations of this and have it at your fingertips. like you can today. 100 years ago, you couldn't do what you can do today. You can't just go ahead and 100 years ago, you couldn't just research whatever you were curious about. You had to either read a book or somebody had to tell you their certain perspective and understanding. Right now, we have so much accessibility to so much information, whether it is spiritual, whether it is scientific, whether it is religious, whether it is cultural. So naturally, inevitably, that's going to lead towards humans becoming more conscious of their existence, more conscious of their biology, more conscious of their environment, more conscious of the prospect of life after death, more conscious of psychology, neurology, the empathy, love, etc., wisdom, philosophical interpretations. So, with the introduction of this technology, it has its pros and cons. Its cons are it can breed a narcissistic world where there's a heavy emphasis on entertainment, pleasure, and materialism. And so people can become highly competitive towards each other and place a huge priority on things and not people. But on the other end of that, it can also inspire the opposite of that. It can inspire a more thoughtful species, more thoughtful people, more intelligently aware uh, civilization, right? So, with the introduction of artificial intelligence in its current level of infancy, humans are able to research and solve problems unlike they've never been able to do before. So it's inevitable that artificial intelligence exists and will continue to develop in its evolution. So I can only hope that it's used in order for people to better their lives, better the lives of other people, and solve our biggest problems, whether it is medical problems, whether it is the problem of poverty, and whether it is the problem of humans' indifference towards each other that leads to things like war. The fact that us as a civilization still conduct and practice war shows that we are very primitive. We're primitive people. If people are still violent, if people are still unempathetic towards people, if they cannot evolve their consciousness and psychology to be more conducive towards a healthy state of mind by practicing things like empathy and forgiveness and love, whether it be self-love or love towards other people, love of life. So I hope us as humans are heading in that direction, because the fact that we still conduct war shows that we are very primitive. We have not mastered ourselves as species. We have not mastered ourselves as civilization. We live in a very territorial and resource dependent state of mind. And the scarcity mindset and this mindset of not being able to accept one another for who we are, and as opposed to destroying each other, help each other. But there's certain governments and bureaucracies and people that agree with the practices of certain governments and certain bureaucratical frameworks. Some people agree with war in how it's being conducted today. And that shows you the mirror of the human condition within humanity's current state of evolution. That shows you that we are quite limited and underdeveloped and primitive within that regard. I mean, we have nuclear weapons which countries are hoarding in case of war with each other. We live in a very intense geopolitical framework. And the fact that people will even go to war and be responsible for deaths of people, millions of deaths in a modern age. We should have less war, less collateral damage of human life in this environment. if we are evolving further as a species where we should be. Don't forget that beings posing as humans that hurt others because they do not have the ability to feel or have emotions. So the fact that, we are still conducting war, I don't believe in war in any sense or any fashion or any degree. I most certainly don't believe in sending people to go kill each other. I actually believe that's evil. I believe any country or government that's practicing war is practicing evil. It is evil. How can you say that murder is not evil? Murder is evil. There's no other way to look at it. It's evil, it's ugly, it's horrendous. So I hope that the new leaders of this world and the children that are being taught to become leaders can lead in such a way where we empathize with the need for peace amongst our fellow man and find ways to inspire, encourage, and incorporate and develop that into our society. Because if we don't do that and society doesn't head in that direction, some very terrible things can happen down the line, which I cannot even imagine or mention right now. But the fact that we have the capability to destroy Earth with nuclear weaponry is quite alarming. But I have a lot of faith in humans as well. I have a lot of faith that humans do care and that there are humans out there that do care. And we see evidence of this within certain fields of humanity that are developing or have been developed. Whether it's a nurse or a doctor looking after the life of people, whether it's charities, whether it's missionaries, whatever the case may be, whether it's certain fields of science that are looking at solving these problems for other people, even if it's law. I have faith in humans naturally being empathetic, loving beings. We have violent humans, but I don't believe it's in our nature to be violent. I believe violence is just a byproduct of our environment, and we teach violence instead of teaching peace. And it's always might is right, and whoever has the more power can exert that power over someone else in order to dominate them, instead of developing an empathetic perspective and viewpoint towards our fellow man. So yeah, I think what I've tried to discuss in this video is that life is miraculous, it's magical, it's beautiful, but at many times it can seem really scary, really cold, really dark. But I think us as humans need to be aware of that, but not continuously focus on that. And instead, we need to be aware of the problems we can solve, but we also need to be aware of all the good things and focus on all the good things that life has to present. Love, family, relationships, interconnectedness, empathy, happiness, joy, creativity, art, meaning, value. And those things are all really important. And I hope and wish that people can help change this world. I'm working on doing it myself. I'm busy programming certain products and stuff. I think about these things deeply, and I think about how to make life better for other people in a way that actually can make a massive impact. And I work towards that continually. And I know that there's other people out there that do exactly the same thing. And I'm very happy for that. And I only wish that more people like that, more people are taught to think like that, more people are taught to care that much, and more people are taught to apply themselves to figure out how to make life better for other people. Because we have to, as a human species, while still alive here, we should prioritize and focus on that, on alleviating people's tensions, their fears, their indifferences, their inability to connect with each other, connect with their family, their ability to see the importance and meaning of life, the importance and meaning of their own life and the lives of other people and beings around them. So I would like to think we're headed in that direction, but of course, there's a lot of variables that suggest that we may not be, like war, like technology, like the problems we face. I mean, we've never had so many depressed humans here on Earth. So that shows and tells us that a lot of people are struggling psychologically. You know, I don't think we've had such high levels of suicide and unaliving as we have today. And that just shows you the dark nature of the human psyche and where it can lead. And us as people need to be figuring out how to solve those issues, solve those problems, so we don't live and our future generations don't live in a depressing world that creates more depression than happiness, that creates more people feeling a need to end their life. We need to look after each other. We need to, and we don't live in a world where that is as conducive as it could be. Because if we did, maybe those people that felt a need to end their life wouldn't have felt so alone. Maybe they would never have felt the need to do that. So I'm just commenting on the current states of the human condition and life here on Earth and how that needs to change. But that needs to change. This way of let's just become successful and not share that wealth and not help people and just help ourselves instead, because we cannot see the meaning and value of looking after each other. It needs to end. It needs to evolve. It needs to progress, and it needs to change, because people need to care more. Fortunately enough, I think that obviously we have a lot of racism, but we don't have slavery like we used to. Of course, slavery actually still does exist, funnily enough, which is a thing I'd like not to believe, but according to Google, there are people who are actual slaves on Earth right now currently, which is also mind-blowing and perplexing. It's also mind-blowing and perplexing to think that over 1 million people are starving in the world. I think that's the correct figure. I may be wrong. Last time I checked that, it's like 1 million people. And it's quite sad to think that we have so many billionaires and so much wealth generated today, yet people have not allocated that wealth towards solving those problems, solving a problem of 1 million people suffering of starvation here on Earth. That's extremely solvable, especially thanks to people with lots of resources that can put a lot of minds to work. As I've mentioned, simple solutions could be used to solve that. Like governments should be planting fruit trees everywhere. People should be planting fruit trees everywhere. I mean, and allocating money to dig water wells and whatever the case may be, whatever is needed. We have the money to solve those problems, but nobody's using their money to solve those problems. And it's pretty sad and annoying and frustrating. And it makes me upset at those people who have that wealth, that wealth and resources, who are not using it in order to develop think tanks to solve the problem of 1 million people suffering of starvation here on Earth. That is a solvable problem. You cannot tell me that amongst 7 billion people, we have the inability to solve a hunger crisis for 1 million people. You cannot tell me that with the ability to create food and produce and these commercial, industrial production facilities, you cannot tell me that we don't have the resources and technology to solve those problems. We actually do, but nobody's doing it who has the resources and power to do it. I hope to be one of those people one day, which is why I'm developing a application and technology to get those resources and to put together those think tanks to solve those issues and to advocate the need for this, to inspire other people to do that as well, and to hold other people to account in powerful positions of having lots of resources, to ask them and say to them, why haven't you guys actually put your heads together in order to solve this? You have enough money to solve this. Like, you're developing robotics and stuff, okay? So develop a farm that's run by robots, that that plants trees, that plants fruit trees all over the earth, plants a couple billion fruit trees over the earth, and you will see the abundance of life here for humans flourish. Why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we creating more water wells? Why aren't we uh, planting more food, trees that actually produce food? You know, simple solutions to seemingly complicated problems. But the leaders of this world are not putting their heads together in order to solve things that I myself am saying can be solved with the resources they have, quite simply and quite quickly. Yet they're not doing it because humans don't exist within that mental framework of seeing the need in order to solve those problems, to alleviate those problems. I look at it like this. I don't like to suffer. I've suffered through many things in my life, and many people have. Everyone does. And I've been through moments where I felt sad and alone and depressed, which gives me more empathy towards other people that may feel that. And so I can't help but relate to people in a certain way, to relate to the fact that, I'm not suffering as badly as other people on this earth are suffering. And you can't help but relate to that suffering because we live in a world where there is suffering. Suffering does exist. We don't only have joy and happiness. We also have some things that we don't want to speak about or don't want to mention that do exist, like human suffering, okay? Even suffering of animals, suffering of the environment. And I just hope that wherever all of this evolution of civilization and technology leads towards, people start solving these problems. Because why should a child have to suffer? Why should a child have to go without food? Like, I know what it's like to have been a child. I'm very fortunate and blessed for the upbringing I've had. But I can't help but think that a lot of other people are in far worse positions than that. And I can't help but relate to them because I'm a human and they're human too. And I don't like the idea of people not having enough, people having to struggle, people having to suffer, especially children and people. So, in this world, you can develop one of two perspectives. You can develop a very cold and a very scary perspective where the universe seems like a cold, dark, and scary place. Or you can, and humans are horrible and humans are terrible, which, don't get me wrong, humans can be horrible, humans can be terrible. Very disappointing and upsetting. But the other perspective is being able to look beyond that, be able to see the beauty in humanity, the beauty in humans, the beauty in our fellow people. And as much of it as a reality that there are uncaring, cold, disheartened people out there, it's also a reality that there are very caring, loving individuals out there. And some of them may not have a lot of stuff. Like, I live in South Africa, which has a lot of poverty. And I come across impoverished Africans all the time, and they're always so respectable. They're always so open. They're warm-hearted. Of course, I live in a very dangerous country, but a lot of the people I come across who are impoverished are very nice people, very accepting and happy people, funnily enough. So I live in a country where you can't help but see poverty around you and see people struggling around you. And it's been that way all my life living in this country. So I've always, I want to help these people because the way I see it, we have a a limited lifespan here on earth. And of course, anyone would want to live a good life, an enjoyable life, where you're having an abundant life, where you're not struggling, where you're not suffering. And of course, anyone would love to have an enjoyable life, full of enjoyable experiences, loving relationships. And I just wish that for other people. Because some people come from terrible family backgrounds. And money and scarcity always seems to be the core of that, you know. So I'm going to keep working on figuring out how to solve these problems in amazing, great, and creative ways like I am now. Because one day I do want to be responsible for making sure that a lot of people, as I said, you would want to live a good life. I want to not only live a good life, but I want to help other people live a good life as well. Because I'm very empathetic towards the fact that we live here on earth. It can be cold, dark, and horrible. And nobody likes to suffer, and nobody should suffer. And I can't help but empathize with the fact that some people do suffer. And I want to be responsible in my life for bringing more happiness and joy to people, and helping steer the course of human civilization towards prioritizing, not only making sure you yourself have a good life, but you can have enough of a good life to be able to have an abundant surplus to help others. And we can start eliminating these problems of children not having food, of children living in families where these families are fighting about financial conditions. Because I know what it's like to be a child, and I think it's great to give children happy childhoods, That's what you'd hope for in civilization and society, is more children having happy childhoods, happy adulthood, leading to becoming happy adults. Don't get me wrong, adversity does help us develop as people. Adversity teaches people to become more empathetic towards their fellow man. Like if you go through problems, you just become more empathetic towards other people that may be experiencing those sort of problems, or problems in general. So as complicated and challenging as life can be, those challenges do give us an opportunity to grow as humans, and hopefully that growth leads into abundance within your life, and abundance that spills over and shares into the lives of other people. As we gain more wisdom and knowledge and intelligence, as we continue to evolve and progress as human beings here on earth. So these challenges of adversity, they teach us these things to gain more wisdom, and most valuably, wisdom that leads in the direction of caring more about other people, and caring about the need for a happy world for people to live in. If you have a happy world, you have happy people, you live in a happy environment, and you are exposed to more happiness. You yourself are going to be more happy as you're exposed to more happy people, as you're exposed to more happy environments. If you look on YouTube and you look through videos and you look through stuff, the trends in culture online, you can see humans are quite cold towards each other and quite judgmental of each other. So it's a clear reflection of our society and civilization that we live in a world where people have very closed minds, where they feel the need to persecute and oppress each other, even in the format of YouTube videos. Because most of these YouTube channels I watch are always picking someone apart, are always, I don't know what I'm trying to explain, but what I'm trying to explain is that a lot of the people's perspectives online seem to be very cold, disheartened perspectives. Of course, there are people online that 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 have loving perspectives and loving things they share. But culturally speaking, the most popular stuff is a bit cold and disheartened and alienating. And so, why do I even care about this? Why am I even thinking about all these things? I sometimes can't help but think about it as I'm a human just like you. Every day I'm observing something. Every day I'm thinking. Every day you thinking. You know, we're almost like a progression and byproduct of years of thought processes and experiences where our thinking evolves, our perspectives evolve, our ways of looking at the world evolve. And every day we're thinking. And some people want to say, oh, you're in a computer simulation and you live amongst NPCs. It dehumanizes other people. Let me explain something to you. That's not an NPC. That's another human being with a brain and a body just like you, who is thinking thoughts every single day just like you. Wrap your head around that. Every single human is always thinking. What are they thinking about? What are they perceiving? Is their thinking leading them to being more depressed or more happy? Developing a positive perspective of the world or a pessimistic perspective of the world? Every day, everyone's thinking. And sometimes people's own thought destroys them and can destroy you. Your own thinking and your own imagination can destroy you. Your own fears, fear is the ultimate dream killer. Your fears can destroy you. Your fears can prevent you from seeing the beauty in the world, seeing a possibility of abundance within your own life, a possibility of achieving certain things you set out to achieve. Stacy says, I think the world will be a very different place at this time next year for the better. Humanity is going to rally. And I I love that and I agree with that. Because I think since 2020, it's caused a lot of problems and difficulties that people have been facing, whether financial, economic, or psychological, whether it's alienating humans more, creating a loneliness epidemic. Right now, it's funny how us as a collective consciousness seem to, because of the events that transpire here on Earth, go through the same sort of thing and experience it in our life. Like if there's a Great Depression, it's called a Great Depression for a reason, because a lot of people are depressed because things are not so good, things are not so great. No, you're not, Jess. You're just a human. There's a lot of empty vessels out there. Yeah, there's a lot of empty vessels out there, but just like me, they have thoughts, they have brains, they have minds, and they have emotions. So, by the way, if you've enjoyed this talk and you're not on my Patreon and you would like to support my work, you can find the link in the description to my Patreon. Any support would be greatly appreciated as it helps me to continue the work that I'm doing. I'm programming every single day an application which I'm planning to use to help the world in a lot of big ways. You're not just a human. Yeah, I agree with that. I believe I believe I have a soul. I believe I have a spirit. I believe on many levels we are more than human. But for right now, we're in this human experience. Absolutely. I'm hearing this lightning now. That also blows my mind. Kind of scares me a little bit. Every time I hear lightning, I feel like it's God or something. And it scares me a little. I'm not going to lie. Just need to close this door because it's starting to rain. So yeah, these are some of the things I think about. I think a lot every day. And I think about all sorts of stuff. I went through a huge existential crisis. I went through a depression because I was developing a very unhopeful, uninspired, materialistic perspective of the world and of my life. A lot of fears crept up. Be thinking about life after death, my family. Be thinking about meaning and life. I've been thinking about how reality, when you're depressed, reality can seem a lot more colder and darker than it actually is, because you tend to focus on these certain realities that exist amongst us. So I just want to let you know and let myself know that depression is it's temporary, and we can think our ways through these things as we begin to find more purpose, meaning, and value within our own lives, and use that in order to change our lives for the better, and idealistically help change the lives of others for the better. If you're in the position to be able to do that, I'll do my best to get there. Robin, you are already there. You're just like me, fellow human here on earth, and we're just existing and doing the best we can every single day and every single passing moment. So, yeah, I mean, when you overthink stuff, it can lead you towards developing a very negative and pessimistic view of reality, and that can obviously lead in towards depression. I went through a lot of things that caused that depression, like developing schizophrenia, going through some troubles and problems. But that's another thing I want to talk about, is that we can't give up hope. Hope is so important, it's so valuable, and belief in ourselves, belief in each other. To be able to live the lives we want to live, you have to have a certain sense of optimism. And don't give into negativity. Don't let negativity control your thought, your mind, your way of thinking. We're so quick to imagine things that can go wrong, as opposed to imagining things that can go right. And I think it's better to be aware of things that can go wrong, but have faith, and focus on the things that can go right, and the things that are going right, and the things that you have to be grateful for right now. And, to motivate and inspire yourself to do things that you want to do, to live a happy life here while you're still on earth, because you deserve it. Why don't you deserve it? Everyone deserves it. You're very humble. Your life journey is not for the faint of heart. You're a living testimony yourself, Jesse. Thank you very much, Stacey. And testimony. Yeah, I whenever I get depressed or get down or face challenges in life, I always like to think that once I overcome this, and once I get through it, and once I progress and evolve beyond it, I will develop more strength, develop more wisdom, that as I grow older will become more useful and applicable towards helping not only myself but other people. So I look at adversity as a gift. Obviously, no one wants to go through adversity. I don't welcome adversity. Everyone likes things to run smoothly, but sometimes they don't. But whenever they don't, there are opportunities for us to learn, to become better versions of ourselves, to become more masterful within this ability to breeze through this human experience, and to become happy, to master happiness, and love. Love is something I have to learn continually. It's not something you just learn and it's over with. It's something that's ongoing within your life here on earth, whether it be through family relationships, your perspective of other human beings, other life forms. One of the things I learned was, if I hold on to a very negative, pessimistic viewpoint of humanity and life, then I wouldn't see the goodness in life. I wouldn't see the goodness in humans, and I wouldn't see the need and importance for learning to be more loving, to be learning to be more accepting, more empathetic. So, through all these adversities, that's what I've ultimately learned, is to I've gone through troubles, I've cried, I've gone through stuff, and I'm not the only one. Everyone goes through this sort of stuff. So I guess when you get through the other side of it and you progress and evolve with those little gems of learning how to deal with it, how to conquer and face those adversities and challenges, it just makes you a stronger, better human who is more prone towards positivity, optimism, happiness, and proactivity. And those things are important to live a healthy, balanced life that can progress in a great, lovely, positive direction. I don't believe anyone should give up on their dreams. I believe people should fight for their dreams. And I don't say fight for their dreams, but just don't stop believing. Because the moment you stop believing, you stop having hope. A lot of people, their lives are perfect just the way they like them. They have a happy family, they have a abundant financial situation, on whatever level that may be, but they're content. And I think that's really amazing, and that's really happy. And for some people, that's just a lot of people's dream, you know. So I think if you have those things, don't take them for granted and be very grateful for them and give thanks for them. Just to be able to have food and shelter every day and a functioning body is a great gift compared to what some people have out there. And we need to remind ourselves of that time to time so that we don't develop this negative perspective of our own condition, our own life. You know, um, we have the ability to do stuff. We have the ability to have internet and to learn. And sometimes we go through challenges, but every challenge you can learn to overcome. And that's why I say one thing any depressed person should remember is that depression is temporary, especially if you have a fighting spirit and you make sure to teach yourself to have faith and to not lose hope. And because if you lose faith, if you lose hope, you just become inactive in your own life and you don't try the things you would generally try because fear's getting in the way and it's stopping you from living in a fulfilled manner. So, as I've said, I live in a world where I have seemingly unlimited information at my fingertips. And so I learn stuff about each other, about psychology, about the world, about God, about spirit, about existence. And I would like to remind myself now that everything I learn should work towards creating a better, happier man that can create a better, happier life for myself and others. Because the moment you lose hope and you give in to this negativity, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. But sometimes we have to go through that. Sometimes it's inevitable for us to go through a depression. Because in that depression, in that way of perceiving the world, we end up thinking in new directions. And once we get out on the other side of it, we come out changed in the way in which it is that we perceive the world. So, for anyone that may be experiencing that, I would just like to let you know one of the things I said to myself when I had schizophrenia and I was going through a very terrible time is that the only way in order to master overcoming depression is to first become depressed. And if you do happen to become depressed, it's just an opportunity for you to overcome it and learn to become happier, more hopeful, more optimistic, more positive. And those experiences and life lessons never leave you. I believe they stay, which is why I love listening to wisdom from older people who have managed to look back at their lives in later stages and have managed to say to themselves that, wow, maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought. I had it all wrong. I perceived the world differently. Like if I look back at my past self, I had a very warped perception of myself, a warped perception of the world. I was very materialistic and money hungry, and a lot of my happiness depended upon that. And there's certain things you just think that you could tell your younger self to do differently, but there's no point in doing that because it's already done. And as you grow older, you've learned whatever lessons you needed to learn because of your life experiences. and you look back and you're like, well, I know how to do things differently now. I know how to have a different disposition mentally and psychologically towards myself and my life now that may be more conducive towards growth and happiness, and optimism. So I enjoy people who share that same sentiment and who are older and have looked back at life. Like, one of the things I learned is to value my family, value my parents a lot more, because as you grow older and you realize the fleeting nature of life, and you tend to think about that more often than not, you tend to see more and more the value and importance of the beautiful gift of family and the relationships in your life in which it is that you may have, and should harness and cultivate through love to preserve and progress and develop them. And I believe everyone deserves a second chance, that people do and can change, and change for the better. And because of that, I would like to remind myself to have more hope in humanity, to have more hope in other people, even though at times I develop a very negative perspective towards certain people here on this earth. And what I've been teaching myself to do is to change that perspective and to, I guess, not get so caught up in some of the unwanted, horrible things people may do, and let that be the center of my focus when looking at life here on earth, when looking at humanity. So I guess in a way, this is like a video log of me expressing, because usually I make a live video like once a week, and I take time to think about this stuff and think about what I can possibly speak about in terms of sharing my experiences, sharing my perspectives, because that's all I'm doing. I'm sharing my opinion, perspectives, beliefs, and experiences. And every week, it's like I take time to think about life a little bit more. And it's like every week I progress and develop more in my explored perception and increased understanding of myself and other people. And it's like you're constantly revising the way in which it is that you look at yourself and the way in this you look at other people. And so it's quite interesting to create YouTube videos which act as, I guess, little records of my progression of belief and thoughts and perspectives. Because that's what we're doing all the time. Our beliefs, thoughts, and perspectives are continually progressing because we're continually thinking. And I would like to think a lot of people are continually thinking about some of these complexities of life, or life in general, or life itself, and the meaning, the value, the purpose, all of these things. And as we do that, I suppose we become more self-aware and aware of other people, and aware of the world it is we happen to live in. And so our perspective of the world is constantly evolving, and hopefully for the better. Because you got to imagine, everyone's thinking. The question is, what are they thinking about? What are their interests evolving and developing into? Some people may not like to think about any of this stuff. Maybe some of the stuff scares them or puts them off, and that's completely, totally understandable, as we're all unique individuals with free agency to think and believe what it is that we like, and everyone has absolutely the right to do that. You know what I miss? I miss when you're making your music or still doing that. What I've been doing is I've been programming a lot, so I'm not in a music phase right now. But I need to keep learning how to make more music better, because I 3D develop stuff. I graphic design, I'm a cinematographer, I'm a programmer and developer, and I guess you could say musician. And I combine all these skills into this thing that I'm working on now. So right now I'm not in the music phase. And right now, to be very honest with you, I've been going through an existential crisis of thinking about all this deep personal stuff and processing certain fears I have of life, of not succeeding, of losing my family, my parents, of no life after death, of people and relationships, of uh, ensuring I have a happy life and I know I'll have a happy life if when I figure out how to make other people's lives happy, because that makes me happy. Um, I think that's the last step before suicide. No hope. Hope is so important. Absolutely. That's one of the things I learned to get myself out of this. Is like, I went through schizophrenia. I went through this existential crisis. And like when you start viewing reality through a certain perspective, it's very easy to lose hope. It's very easy to lose hope. And to get myself out of it, I had to remind myself I have every reason to be hopeful. And when you're more hopeful, you're more proactive in your life, as opposed to being stifled within fear. Express it through music is beautiful, absolutely. And that's one of the things I'm doing. I have so many interests and developing talents that I'm combining into one thing I'm doing, like right now, as I said. Been coding and programming every day. So being stuck in a room and coding and programming every day while thinking about a lot of the stuff I talk about and a lot of the stuff I think about, it just it sometimes gets very repetitive and mundane, and it can be a bit depressing. So I have to continually make sure to stay above that depression. Okay, I'm gonna admit it. I've gone through very deep depression and existential point of crisis within my life. And maybe that's what happens when someone goes through a midlife crisis. I'm not 50 years old, I'm 33, but maybe that's what happens. They chase everything in life and they grow older and they face all of these dilemmas in their mind. I'm growing older, I'm closer to death, my family's growing older. All these things you can possibly think about that, if you don't look at it in the right perspective, can lead you towards being quite depressed, actually. So I'm going to speak about depression, not from a perspective of expecting you to feel sorry for me, but from a perspective of it's a natural thing and it's important to know how to overcome it. I love you, Jess. You've helped more people than you'll ever know. Thank you very much, and I appreciate that. And I'm very excited for once I launch my new project, because I believe I'll be able to help a lot more people. And that's just what interests me, figuring that out. Because I think about this stuff all the time. So it's hard not to develop projects or products that are centered around wanting to solve these issues of making life better and happier for people. It's hard not to think about that, because I live in a context of Earth. It's not just me here on Earth. There's like 7-8 billion people. And so I'm not alone. Although at times I've gone through a lot of loneliness. Loneliness could also lead to depression. But I got to be lonely right now because I have to work. I have to put my time and effort towards working on this dream of mine, which is going quite well, actually. I'm developing something quite great, and I'm quite happy about that. So constantly being able to develop something towards my goals and objectives helps alleviate that depression and produce hope. Like your hope, if you're hopeful, it should translate into activity or proactivity within your own life. Because if you have no hope, you're lethargic, you're apathetic towards your life, and you develop a sense of hopelessness, which develops inactivity within your own life. And I guess some of the lessons I've learned is life is a very serious thing. I know a lot of people say that we live in a game. I don't believe this is a game. This is pretty serious, guys. It's not a game. Maybe you can make it a game or make a game of your life, but life is not a game. Life is very fragile in many ways. People can suffer. What kind of game produces suffering, So I take life a little bit more seriously than calling it a game, but I have to remind myself not to take life too seriously, not to take things too seriously. Although I, I take my projects seriously, I take this and that seriously, but because people get worked up over stuff, like, guys, we're all gonna die one day. Why are you getting so worked up over all these perceived differences that we may have? You know, we're connected in the fact that we're human, and we're connected in the fact that one day we're born, one day we die. And it's like people avoid the idea of death, but I think we should embrace it. I think if we avoid it, we don't tackle certain important things in our mind that make, as Sacred Terra just says, life is precious, that help us learn to value life more. And a gift, we should make the best of life. Because when you realize that, your life here on earth is limited, and so is your family's, you should do exactly what Sacred Terra is here, and you should make the best of life. And why not? You deserve it. I find it weird that some people, including myself, find it difficult to imagine that they deserve to be happy in life. That's one of the things I have to remind myself is I deserve to be happy. I deserve to go after what I want to be successful in it, to accomplish those things. Why should I think otherwise? Everyone deserves that. So do I. I deserve that. I deserve to live a happy life. But it's so funny that how life molds you in such a way that it's like makes you sometimes subconsciously question whether you're even deserving of having a happy, successful, healthy life. You deserve it. Everyone does. That's sort of the problem of why humans struggle to connect with each other here on Earth, because everyone's so worried about their own challenges and adversities that they face within their own life. And in many cases, that worry can haunt them, and their own imagination becomes their own enemy. I think our imagination should be our friend, not our enemy. I think our imagination should lead towards making us more inspired, more motivated, more hopeful, more faithful, more loving. If your imagination is making you more fearful, well, when you're in states of fear, it's very difficult to think about all those wonderful things. When we're in fear, we can tend to behave differently to people. We can tend to be ugly towards people. And I think that's also another thing is we learn how to conquer our fears. And I guess the way in order to conquer them is to face them and to get over them, get over your fears, so that your imagination doesn't haunt you by imagining what it is you fear. Instead, imagine what it is that you wish for and welcome. And our imagination shouldn't kill us. Stress is the leading cause of disease. So that shows you that human imagination and obviously human conditions that lead towards those perceived imaginations, our imagination kills us. There's a beautiful quote, I mentioned it before when I was speaking to Sacred Terra, which was, I've known many troubles in life, but many of them have not come to be, or something like that. Something about how I feared so many things in life, but as I grew older, I realized that I didn't have to fear all those things. Because obviously there's some valid fears we may have, but sometimes when you tend to overthink and your thoughts structured and guided by fear, your imagination will begin to haunt you, man. You'll imagine the worst outcomes. And because of that, we lose hope, we lose faith. So we master fear, we overcome fear. And as we do that, we learn how to stabilize our faith, stabilize our hope, stabilize our positivity, optimism, and happiness. because we got to. Some people have to learn how to be happy. I've had to learn how to be happy. I've had to learn how to motivate myself. I've had to learn how to inspire myself. I've had to learn how to develop a positive perspective towards my life, towards life in general. Because if you don't do that and you go the other route, you're heading towards depression, man. So it's constant upkeep. I make that sound like a chore. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't sound like that. It should sound happier or more delightful, I guess. But sometimes it does take a bit of work to drill that into your own head. To be like, I'm not with the pessimism. I'm not with the negativity. I can't sit here and imagine worst case scenarios of my own life and be stuck in those cycles of fearful imagination. So our imagination is our greatest tool, but so is our faith and so is our hope. And my I wish for people to go after their dreams, to not stop believing and to learn what they need to learn in order to accomplish it, but to be content throughout that process and not need a certain end result in order to finally feel happy. And instead learn to love the journey, learn to just love being alive as it is, and to be grateful for that. Because if we can just learn how to be happy with the little we have, then we can. This is my belief, anyways. Learn how to manage our positivity, manage our happiness. Because you kind of have to, because it's your own thought. You're responsible for your own thought. You're responsible for the things you think about, the things you believe, the things you entertain within your own mind. You are responsible for whether you're going to become depressed or not. I mean, you're not entirely responsible, but your thoughts can lead towards that outcome. So in that way, we are responsible. We're responsible for what we think about, for what we entertain in our minds, for what we believe, for what we imagine, and it's an ongoing process. And I believe it becomes more intuitive, more easy, less of a work, less of sounding like work, and less of a burden. So I've been through dark times, and many people have. And the good times and the bad times mold us, or at least shape us in a certain trajectory. And maybe when we reach those pivotal, amazing, miraculous moments in our life, we look back at the tough, horrible stuff we've been through and become grateful for it. Become extremely, extremely happy and grateful for it. And you look back at your life at some stuff that made you cry and made you upset and made you extremely negative and pessimistic, and you overcome that and you progress and you evolve and develop to one day things are different. Things are super happy, bright and happy. And you look back and you see, wow, those tough things I went through happened for a reason, for some sort of reason, because they've led towards me becoming a stronger, happier individual who's managed to do what I wanted to do in life. And you look back at it and you reach this happy point, which is this accumulation of all your experiences to this breakthrough moment in your life. And you look back at the troubles you've been through and how they shaped you, how they taught you, how they helped you gain more wisdom, how they helped you gain more control over your ability to be a happier, more positive and productive person in your own life, according to your own will, according to what makes you happy, what makes you tick. So I think those moments are amazing because we look back and we're like, wow, it was all worth it. And I think what's also amazing is when we progress in our life and things don't go as bad as we thought they would, and things go better than we thought they would. And you begin to realize, wow, I had a lot of fears, but a lot of them, everything I feared is not happening. It's not coming true. And when I deal with an obsessive fear, it's horrible because it's all consuming. It consumes your thought. And then you have to think your way out of it. You have to think your way out of it. So we are responsible for picking ourselves up off of the floor sometimes, most of the time, if not all of the time. And in order to do that, we need to be more positively inclined than negative. So I'm only 33. I don't know everything. This is just my perspective. This is where I'm at. This is how I'm making sense of my own life. This is how I'm motivating myself to find meaning and purpose in the good and the bad, and to make use of it as opposed to just discard it and throw it away. This is how I'm looking at generating wisdom, generating success in life, and particularly success in becoming a better version of myself. Because at the end of the day, when there's no one around, all you're left with is yourself. And if you got to pick yourself up, you got to pick yourself up. If you got to drill positivity into your mind and find ways to love life, love others, love yourself, at the end of the day, the one who's responsible for doing that is you. So you have to be strong, I find. You got to be strong. You got to be strong enough at least to overcome fear, strong enough to make use of the negative things you've been through and put a positive spin on it. Strong enough to be able to pick yourself up when you need to. Strong enough to get through whatever you need to get through so that you can push yourself to keep believing, to keep being hopeful, to keep being faithful, to keep being happy. It requires a certain level of mental resilience and strength. And I believe we develop this mental resilience and strength as time progresses and evolves. So as I said, it's very interesting each week when I make a video here, when I share stuff based on what I've been thinking. Because everything I'm telling you, I'm telling myself. I've had to tell myself in times of need, in times of having to get through certain things, getting through grisly, dark depressions in order to get rid of that cloud of negativity in my own mind and to overcome it. So every week we are overcoming things, or have the opportunity and the ability to overcome things within our own mind, things within our own imagination. And so it's interesting how every day you're thinking, every week you're thinking, every day you're progressing, every week you're progressing, at least in your level of self-awareness, wisdom, and understanding. So that's just human, that's part of the human condition. We go through stuff and we got to get through it. There's no other way. And it's up to us to find happiness, more reasons to be happy than sad. That's part of what it means to be conscious, to have a mind, to think about stuff. It kind of blows my mind that we're constantly thinking. We're always thinking about stuff. The question is, what are you thinking about? And what is what you're thinking about doing for you? As I said, sometimes there's lights in the darkness and darkness in the light. We, sometimes thinking about stuff that makes you feel a certain way is somehow important for who you'll become later on in life. Sometimes going through certain depressions is important for who you'll become later on in life. Actually, most of the time, if not all of the time, if you make use of it. So how many? 2 hours, 40 minutes. Wow, it's a bit of a long live stream. So yeah, I go through stuff. I'm just a human being like anybody else. It's really humbling to know that. I see myself as just a random guy born in certain conditions here on earth with a certain disposition right now, but I'm as human as anybody else. And it's good to know that. Because this whole idea of NPCs and blah 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 makes you look at people like they're not people, like they're not people who have brains and minds like you. They're not people that think about stuff all day long. They're exactly like that. They have the same ability, and that's how the human mind works. Maybe they think about different stuff that's not so good or whatever, but the point is that we all have we're all freaking human. And we're all beings, man. We all got minds and we all got thoughts. And we all face stuff and we all go through stuff. We go through good times and bad times. We develop strength or develop weakness. We develop happiness or we develop sorrow. But just like you, just like me, just like anybody, we can overcome these things as we progress and evolve and develop. Thank you, Jesse. You're a blessing, and your words and your time is very appreciated, brother. Thanks, man. I appreciate that a lot. I'm glad that I'm at times hopefully able to actually share my own personal experience in a way that can help people reflect better on their own life experiences, to know that you're not alone in the stuff that you may go through. Life, as I said, can be super scary, but once you overcome that fear, you develop strength, and maybe there's something meaningful and important and purposeful about the fact that we do develop strength. We are capable of becoming stronger people, happier, healthier, mentally stronger people, psychologically sound people, more wise. We're constantly evolving. And I don't think that should be overlooked. I think that should be quite valued, the fact that we grow, we develop strength. We develop wisdom. That should be valued. I think it's really valuable to think that the accumulation of your life experiences can lead to somewhere great if you let it, if you allow it, if you guide it in that direction, if you extrapolate the value out of the good and the bad, if you extrapolate the lessons out of the good and the bad and use it to learn, I guess. Look, I'm just speaking from my own perspective. This is my opinion. This is my perspective. This is the stuff I think about. But everyone's got their own different mind. But I think it's cool that we have the ability to share, because there's been times where I've had to watch people sharing information to help me get out of certain positions in my own mind. NPC are not just the background humans. They can anything that distracts you right when you're about to make a breakthrough, about to make a connection with someone. That will be profound experience. My mom always says that. My mom always says when there's a blessing about to happen, things pop up to try deter you, steer you away from doing that. I do believe that. So I think it's great that as humans we can share our experiences, because I love listening to people, as I said, that share their own perspective and opinions on how they see life, how they've overcome certain things, what wisdom they've developed, and how they've developed certain strengths, and what they have learned to prioritize and value and hold important. It's always good to learn. It's always good to share. I think sharing this as someone who doesn't really get to speak to a lot of people is a way to express myself, Maybe that helps me. I don't know. But I think it does. Sometimes I feel really stupid. Sometimes I feel like I can't think clearly. I feel dumb sometimes. But sometimes I persevere and I hold on to hope and I hold on to faith and I accomplish stuff, surprisingly. And I feel capable again. I feel smart. I feel smart within my own right. I feel, because sometimes we forget how powerful we are, or how powerful we can be, or what we're capable of. And so we can look at ourselves from a very demeaning perspective. And then sometimes get out of that and you surprise yourself and you're like, wow, I actually had a ob- objective. I had a goal. I tried to do something. I did it. Sometimes we surprise ourselves and we remind ourselves in surprising ourselves that, wow, we may be capable of a lot more than we think. We may be a lot more powerful than we know. And I think that's a very good perspective to have, that you are capable of a lot more than you know, that you're more powerful than you may know, that you have an ability to overcome challenges more than you may know. And I think that's a comforting thought, to add some value to yourself, value towards your perceived self, how you perceive yourself. And we should value ourselves. We should be able to see ourselves as being able to do more than we think we can. We should be able to see ourselves as being able to accomplish more than we think we can. That's also another important thing. You need to look up to yourself and see the potential in yourself. If you can look up to others and see the potential in them, then you should definitely be able to see the potential in yourself. And every human has unlimited, unexplored potential. So I think that's a really good thing to know in your mind, in your psyche, because it's quite motivating, it's quite affirming, it's quite optimistic and positive. And it leads us away from these negative imaginations of imagining so little for ourselves and imagining so little of ourselves. So, that's my advice as a 33-year-old random dude on earth to myself and to anyone who's watching. I don't know if I should call it advice, but I'm just going to call it my life lessons, what I've learned, my learned experiences, my wisdom as it stands right now, because we're always gaining wisdom. This is just me sharing what I think is important and what's helped me. And it's something I need to keep reminding myself of, because life is a continual process and requires some upkeep. I'll be very honest with you, it requires some upkeep. You got to stay on top of your mind. You got to stay in control of your mind and not let it get the better of you. Do not let your mind be your own worst enemy. Do not slip into this dark, deterministic, materialistic perspective of reality that is so limiting, that is not magical, that has no divinity. We are divine, I would say. I would say reality is pretty divine. I mean, we've just discussed how complicated it is, how unbelievably miraculous that all these infinite amounts of elements somehow hold together and work together, even to the point of life after death. It's pretty divine. It's pretty miraculous. And sometimes I lose that sense of wonder. I lose that sense of seeing life through that lens, and life just seems cold and dark, less meaningful. So it's a fine line and a dance of staying on top of that and being able to see the miraculous nature of reality. This is why I research the stuff I do. This is why I look into the stuff that I do. This is why I talk about the stuff that I do, because for me, it helps me at least see that, whoa, life may be a lot more magical than you think. We continue to exist after death. That thought for me is extremely comforting, inspiring, and motivational, and leaves me wanting to make the most of this life while I'm still alive as best as I can, in the way that I can. Because everyone has their own way. Everyone has their own goals, their own vision, their own desires. And I hope everyone accomplishes them and sets out to do it and believes in themselves. Sometimes easier said than done, I'll be honest with you, but sometimes the best things in life are difficult to achieve. Whether it's a good relationship status with your family, whether it's being abundant and well off, whether it's following your dreams, accomplishing them, whether it's just being content and happy. These are the goals we set for ourselves. And I would like to see, I believe people can accomplish their goals, but sometimes the best goals are the hardest. I'm going to be very honest. Sometimes the best goals are the hardest to accomplish or achieve. But that doesn't mean you can't accomplish and achieve them. It just means that you need to overcome the difficulty of achieving them in order to do it. Do what you set out to do and accomplish it. You are capable of accomplishing what you want to. And sometimes that's not always easy. But just because it's not easy or not easy for us, sometimes I feel like I don't have as much luck as some people have, but I feel very lucky and blessed, don't get me wrong. But I feel like sometimes things are a bit difficult for me. But once you get over that perceived difficulty, you're more motivated to do it because you believe you can. It's got to start with you believing that you can overcome difficulties. If you set objectives and challenges for yourself, and some of them may be difficult, as I said, sometimes some of the best things in life are the most difficult things to achieve. But just because they're difficult to achieve does not mean you cannot achieve them. And in order to achieve them, you need to believe that you can. And then you will. Because you will keep doing it until you do it. So that's what I'm telling myself now in the back of my head. And what I've had to tell myself is that dream big. If you want to, some people have different dreams, and that's totally fine. I envy that at times. But your dreams, the fear of accomplishing your dreams should never get in the way of you attempting to and working towards accomplishing them. Why not, man? You're alive. Like Secretary is creating a comic book. I think that's great. I think do it, man. I think if that's what you love and makes you happy and when you dream about it, inspires you, then that's a perfect indicator that you should be doing that. Because that's what fulfills you. That's what makes you happy. And while we're living here on this life, we might as well do the things we set out to that make us happy, that allow us to express our creativity, express our unique individuality and what we would like to share with this world. And I think maybe everyone, some deep down, yearns to do that. And what I'm saying is that, sometimes the best things in life are the most difficult things to achieve. But just because they're difficult to achieve doesn't mean that you cannot achieve them. And when you lose hope and you're apathetic, you won't even want to try do that. You'll just rather not do it. So, yeah, that's the end of this talk. I hope you've enjoyed it. And we'll see what I end up speaking about in a week's time from now. So everyone who's been supporting me on Patreon, thank you very much. If you would like to support me as I continue coding and programming, developing this application that I'm making in order to get Earth United on the ground again and etc., you can support me on Patreon for as little as $1. And I thank everyone, especially you, Secretary. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Thank you, brother. I'm figuring out the story and the characters. I think it'll be just as good as X-Men or Justice League. And I think that's epic, man. I think that's exciting, and I think you should just keep doing it, dude. And I can't wait to see some of the illustrations and the story. And I think that's really inspiring and motivating when you've got something to work towards. That's what inspires and motivates me. But that's actually one of my dreams, to create a comic one day. I think it's really cool what you're doing. And I wish you the best of luck with that. I know that if you just keep working on it, you'll make something pretty cool, man. And successful, absolutely. It's just, as I said, sometimes the hardest things in life are the most difficult to achieve. And I mean, sorry, my mind's freezing out right now. I need to have a little bit of food and go to bed. But thank you guys so much for your support. I really do appreciate it. I'll see you next week. And I'm going to be sharing some stuff on Patreon that I find throughout this week. But based on what I've been looking at, which is near-death experiences and some other interesting stuff that I come across. That's my vibe, and that's what I do. And I'm glad. I hope people appreciate it. Enjoy it. Yep. Thanks, guys. I really do appreciate your time. We'll see you soon. And I love you guys lots. God bless you guys.